I came to surprise my wife at work. The guard called me the wrong husband. The guard pointed past me and said, "Sir, I see her husband every day. There he is right now." I turned around. A man in a Tom Ford suit walked out of my wife's building like he owned the air inside it. Dark hair, expensive watch. The kind of easy, unhurried walk that belongs to men who have never once in their lives been told no. His visitor badge caught the lobby light as he pushed through the glass door. Frank Sterling, VP Operations. He didn't look at me, not once. I was holding a paper bag from Osteria on Wabash. Lauren's favorite pasta, the rigatoni with the short rib she always said she was going to learn to make at home and never did. The bag was still warm against my arm. I remember that specifically. The warmth of it, because everything else in that moment had gone completely cold. "Sir?" The guard's voice behind me. Careful now, the way voices go, careful when they sense they may have said the wrong thing. "Sir, are you—" I set the bag on his desk. "Wrong building," I said. "Could you pass this to Lauren? Tell her I had to run." Then I walked out before my legs stopped working. My name is Gerald Hartman. I'm 54 years old, and until 14 months ago, I had been married to Lauren Hartman, née Walsh, now the CEO of Meridian Technologies, for 28 years. I want you to hold that number for a second. 28 years. I was 26 when we got married. Lauren was 24. She was working in mid-level project management at a software firm in Schaumburg, already restless, already brilliant in the specific way that made her bosses simultaneously grateful and nervous. I was doing commercial tax accounting for a small firm on Michigan Avenue. We had a one-bedroom in Logan Square with a hot water heater that worked on a schedule only it understood, and a kitchen the size of a walk-in closet that we thought was charming for exactly 1 year before we thought it was maddening. We built from there, together. I want to be precise about that word because Lauren would spend the last 3 years quietly revising it out of our history. Together meant I worked while she climbed. It meant I covered our mortgage when she left the stable job to take the risk. It meant I filed the quarterly taxes for Meridian when it was still 11 people in a rented co-working space and she was coming home at 1 a.m. running on caffeine and conviction. It meant that for 25 of our 28 years, my name was on the financial infrastructure of her ambition, the foundation she poured while she built everything on top of it. I was proud of that. I want to say it plainly without self-pity. I was genuinely proud of her success. The glass tower in the West Loop, the 3 floors of Meridian, the profile in Crane's business 2 years ago, the board, the executive retreats, all of it. I went to the company Christmas parties and shook hands and said, "My wife, Lauren," with real satisfaction in my voice. I had no idea that for the last 3 years, the man whose hand I was shaking at those parties was sleeping with her in a River North apartment she had furnished with our joint account. That Tuesday, I took the afternoon off for the first time in 4 months. I picked up the pasta. I drove to the West Loop. I was going to surprise her, see her face light up, maybe persuade her to eat at her desk for once instead of working through lunch. Simple, stupid, husband stuff. I made it to my car before I started shaking. I sat in the parking garage on Adams for 11 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel before I could make myself start the engine. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the dashboard clock move, 1:47 to 1:58. The guard's words kept replaying. I see her husband every day. Not, I see a man who comes to visit her. Not, I see someone from the office. Her husband. Every day. I told myself it was a mistake. I told myself Frank Sterling was simply a VP who came to her office frequently, and the guard had made an assumption, the way guards make assumptions about things that repeat themselves until they look permanent. I told myself a lot of things during those 11 minutes. Then I drove home. I made dinner. Lasagna from scratch. Because I needed something to do with my hands for 3 hours that wasn't sitting in a chair thinking about the walk of a man in a Tom Ford suit. I set the table. I poured wine. I waited. Lauren came home at 7:23 p.m. She kissed my cheek, dropped her bag on the kitchen chair the way she always does, sat down, looked at the food and said, "You made lasagna. You're my favorite person." I watched her eat. She was relaxed. Not performance relaxed. Genuinely relaxed the way people are when they have not been caught and do not believe they will be. She told me about a vendor dispute and a board call she'd had to reschedule, and a junior analyst who had apparently sent the wrong deck to the wrong client. She mentioned Frank's name once, in passing, something about a budget line he'd flagged. Her voice didn't change on his name, not even a fraction. "Did he mention my lunch?" I asked. She looked up. "What?" "I dropped food at your building today, around 2. Told the guard to pass it up." Lauren frowned. "No, he didn't say anything. Crazy day, you know how it is." She reached across and touched my hand. That was sweet. I looked at her hand on mine. 28 years. "Yeah," I said. "You know me." She smiled and went back to her food. I excused myself shortly after and told her I was going to bed early. She said she'd be up in an hour. She had emails to clear. I listened to the sound of her typing from down the hall and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling until her light went off. Then I waited another 40 minutes. When her breathing settled into the deep, steady rhythm I knew as well as my own, I got up, went to the kitchen, opened her laptop, and typed 061596. Our wedding date. She hadn't changed it. I have thought about that a lot since. Whether she hadn't changed it because she felt safe, or because she was sentimental, or because on some level she believed the password was a kind of lock I'd never think to pick. Whatever the reason, the laptop opened. I went to her calendar first. Dinner with F. Il Posto, 7 p.m., Grand Geneva Resort, executive off-site. 2 rooms. One of those rooms had been canceled. I found the cancellation in her email, a credit to the Meridian corporate card she managed. 1 room remained. I searched the date. The corporate card showed a single charge to Grand Geneva for that weekend. 1 room, 2 nights, $847. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after that. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm pulsed and stopped. My coffee from 6 hours ago was still on the counter in a mug Lauren had given me. The one that said, taxes, certain as death. More annoying that she'd thought was hilarious. I closed the laptop very carefully, as if the noise of the hinge might wake something. Then I went to the bedroom, got dressed without turning on a light, and went back to the kitchen to wait for morning. I found the key at 6:47 a.m. Lauren had been up and out by 6, the way she always was when she had an early call scheduled. She kissed my cheek again, told me not to work too hard, pulled the door shut behind her. I stood in the kitchen for exactly 4 minutes. Then I went to her jewelry drawer, not for any reason I could have articulated. Just the particular instinct of a man who had spent a sleepless night slowly understanding that he had been living inside a lie large enough to have its own furniture, and who needed to know how far it went. Under the cheap costume jewelry, the stuff from the early years, the things she kept for sentiment and never wore, there was a key, plain silver, plastic tag, 2 words printed in small block letters, Harbor View Apartments, Unit 214. I set it on my palm and looked at it for a long time. Then I got in my car. River North, 7:34 a.m. Harbor View Apartments is a mid-rise on Erie Street, the kind of building that sits between upscale and discreet, the kind that attracts residents who want good finishes and no questions. I found the parking structure on the building's side street and pulled in through the gate, space 214. A black Mercedes GLE sat there like it had never lived anywhere else. The license plate matched Frank Sterling's name on a quick search I ran from my phone before I got out. It took 45 seconds to confirm. I walked to the elevator, found Unit 214 on the 2nd floor, stood in front of the door for 30 seconds holding the key. The lock turned, the door opened, and I was standing inside a second marriage. Fresh flowers on the coffee table, white tulips in a clear vase, the same kind Lauren kept on our dining room table at home. Her Chanel in the air, the specific one she'd worn for 15 years that I could identify in a dark room. His suits in the closet, hanging beside her blouses, organized by color the way she organized everything. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, his coffee in the kitchen, her reading glasses on the nightstand, photos on the mantle, Lauren and Frank on a beach, Caribbean from the light. Lauren and Frank at a restaurant, candlelit, her laughing at something he'd said, head tilted back, relaxed in a way that took me a moment to place because I hadn't seen her relax like that in years. Lauren and Frank on a hiking trail, her hand on his chest, the particular comfortable gesture of a woman who feels at home against someone's body. In not one of those photographs was she wearing a wedding ring. I stood in front of the mantle for a long time. Then I turned to the dresser, a manila folder sitting on top, neat handwriting on the tab, 2 words, future plans. I opened it. Real estate listings for houses in Evanston and Wilmette, 3 of them, each with margin notes in her handwriting. Love the kitchen, close to Frank's parents. Check the school district. Printouts from a Meridian financial document I recognized. Operating budget projections, with Frank's division highlighted in yellow. A handwritten note in the margin, COO pathway Q3. And then, paper-clipped together at the back, 3 documents from 3 separate law offices. Consultation summaries, divorce strategy notes. I read them standing up. Frame as irreconcilable differences. Cite Gerald's lack of professional ambition. Marital estate division strategy. Prioritize protection of CEO compensation, stock grants, and deferred income accrued post-2019. Target filing date, January 2025. Estimated finalization, 8 to 10 months. Wedding F by Christmas 2025. I was in there. 3 pages of documents across 3 law offices, and I was in there as a line item, a variable, a problem with a projected resolution date. Gerald's lack of professional ambition. I have a master's in accounting. I have run the tax infrastructure for 4 different companies over 30 years. I built the financial foundation that kept Lauren solvent through 3 pivotal years when Meridian was 1 bad quarter from folding. But when you need a narrative for a divorce, you construct the one that costs you least. And apparently the narrative was, Gerald was never enough. I photographed every page, every margin note, every listing, every legal summary, every photo on the mantle. Then I locked the apartment, took the elevator down, walked to my car, and sat in space 214 next to Frank Sterling's black Mercedes for 23 minutes. After that, I called Richard Morrison. Richard Morrison had been chairman of Meridian's board for 6 years. I had met him at the company Christmas party 2 years running, shaken his hand, made small talk about the Bears, told him I was proud of what Lauren had built. He was in his early 60s, a sharp-eyed man who had run 3 companies before moving to board advisory work, and who, according to every profile I'd ever read, made decisions with the speed of someone who understood that delayed decisions are their own kind of cost. He answered on the 4th ring. Gerald, he said, this is a surprise. I have something the board needs to see, I said. It concerns Lauren and one of her VPs. A A pause, short but careful. Tell me. I'd rather show you, I said. He was at my door in 2 hours. I walked him through everything at the kitchen table, the photographs I'd taken in the apartment, the calendar evidence, the financial records, the real estate listings with Lauren's handwriting, the divorce consultation summaries, and then the piece I'd stayed up extracting from the Meridian internal files I had access to as a secondary administrator on the company's original accounting platform, a permissions level Lauren had never revoked, probably because she'd forgotten I had it. Frank Sterling's division had received budget reallocations totaling $2.3 million over 18 months. Resources shifted quietly, below board visibility thresholds, approved with Lauren's signature. A COO role that didn't formally exist yet was being built around his operational scope. Project assignments that should have been distributed across senior leadership had been funneled through his division, building his portfolio and profile in ways that would make him the obvious choice when the role was formalized. He wasn't just her affair partner. She was building him a ladder inside Meridian using the company's money, and she was using our marriage as cover while she did it. Richard Morrison set down the USB drive I'd prepared and was quiet for a long time. "This is a catastrophic conflict of interest," he said finally. "Yes," I said, "and the personal relationship has been ongoing for, at minimum, 3 years, based on the calendar records and the apartment lease." He looked at me across the table with the particular expression of a man absorbing a situation that is worse than the worst version he'd anticipated walking through the door. "Gerald," he said, "I want you to know that I am deeply sorry. On a personal level. I know what it is," I said. "I appreciate that, but what I need to know right now is what the board is going to do." He sat back. "I'll need to convene an emergency session," he said. "This will require an independent review of all executive resource allocations going back 24 months. Sterling will need to be placed on administrative leave immediately pending investigation. And Lauren," he stopped, "she'll need to be suspended pending investigation," I said. "Yes," I nodded. "Then you have everything you need," I said. "I'll cooperate fully with whoever you appoint to lead the review." I walked him to the door. On the way out, he turned and said, "She doesn't know you've done this?" "Not yet," I said. He looked at me carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make dinner," I said, "and then I'm going to wait." She came home at 7:11 p.m. The color was already leaving her face before she'd taken her coat off. Her phone had been active in her hand since she pulled into the garage. I'd heard the repeated buzz of it through the kitchen wall. I knew the board session had been called. I knew she'd been reached. She walked into the kitchen, stopped, looked at me standing at the stove. "You called Richard Morrison," she said. Her voice was flat, not angry yet, still processing. I kept stirring. "Gerald, you were going to file in January," I said. "Marry him by Christmas. And I was going to be listed as the reason. Lack of ambition." I set down the spoon. "That was the word you used." She crossed to me fast, grabbed my arm, the way she used to when she wanted me to really listen. "What do you want?" she said. "Whatever you want, the house, the accounts, tell me. We can do this cleanly. Nobody has to—" "I already sent the full file," I said. She went still. The kind of still that isn't composure. The kind that happens when a person's internal architecture fails all at once, quietly, like a building going dark floor by floor. "To who?" she said. I looked at her. 45 seconds of silence. "To everyone," I said. I need to explain what everyone meant, because Lauren assumed it was a bluff, and I want the record to be clear that it wasn't. It meant Richard Morrison and the full board of Meridian Technologies, who received the USB drive and began an emergency governance review within 18 hours. It meant Pamela Choi, Meridian's general counsel, 22 years in corporate law, formerly with Baker McKenzie, who opened an independent investigation into the executive resource allocations the following morning and would spend the next 4 weeks producing a 340-page review that found Lauren had improperly directed $3 million in operational budget to Frank Sterling's division during their relationship, creating a conflict of interest that violated her fiduciary duty to the board. It meant my own attorney, David Kowalski, a 41-year veteran of family law in Illinois with an office on LaSalle Street, who, when I sat across from him at 9 a.m. the morning after my kitchen table conversation with Richard, reviewed my documentation and said quietly, "Gerald, this is one of the most comprehensive self-documented cases I have seen in 40 years. Did you have help with this?" I told him no. He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Then no one can claim it was manufactured." It meant Meridian's auditing firm, the external accountants who were brought in alongside the internal review, who spent 6 weeks going through 3 years of Lauren's operational approvals with the specific focus of David Kowalski's discovery requests, and who eventually produced findings that formed Exhibit C through Exhibit K in our divorce proceedings. It also meant the Illinois Department of Financial Accountability, to which a subset of the financial findings was referred for potential securities implications, given that Lauren's resource allocations had coincided with a period in which Meridian's board was evaluating Frank Sterling's division for a potential operational restructuring that could have affected publicly reported performance metrics. I want to be careful here. I am not a lawyer. I didn't pretend to understand everything that was set in motion. What I understood was that when you give documents to the right people know what to do with them. What I understood was that 28 years of my life had been used as infrastructure for something I hadn't consented to be part of. And what I understood, standing at my own stove on a Wednesday night listening to Lauren's phone vibrate against the countertop while she tried to calculate how much I knew, was that the only thing she had left was information asymmetry. She thought I might not know the full scope. She thought I might have only part of it. She thought there might still be something to manage. I wanted her to understand that there wasn't. Frank Sterling was placed on administrative leave by 11 a.m. the next morning. I know this because David Kowalski's paralegal was monitoring the Meridian regulatory filings, and the company filed a brief disclosure that morning referencing an ongoing internal governance review and the administrative leave of 2 senior executives pending its completion. 2. Lauren was suspended with pay pending the outcome of the review. I found out from David, not from Lauren. She had already left the house by then, gone to stay, as I later learned, with her sister in Oak Park. I didn't hear from her directly for 11 days. When I did, it was through counsel. What followed were 8 months of the most technically exhausting experience of my life. And I say technically because the emotional component, grief, loss, the particular specific grief of discovering that a person you trusted completely was running a parallel life, I had largely processed in advance. I had 8 months of sleepless nights before the board meeting. I had already been through the worst of it alone in a parking garage next to a black Mercedes GLE. By the time the divorce proceedings began in earnest, I was past devastated and into something more functional, determined maybe. The feeling of a man who has decided that if his life is being restructured against his will, he is at least going to participate in how. David Kowalski was extraordinary throughout. His strategy was methodical and cold and right. Illinois is not a fault state, which means Lauren's infidelity was not directly admissible as cause in the divorce proceeding itself, but the financial misconduct, the joint account withdrawals totaling $71,400 over 3 years, the documentation that those funds had been used to fund the Harbor View apartment and its furnishings, the corporate card irregularities, that was admissible as marital waste. Marital waste is a legal term. It means one spouse's deliberate dissipation of marital assets. It became Exhibit A. The real estate listings from the Harbor View folder, the ones with her handwriting close to Frank's parents, check the school district, became Exhibit D. The divorce consultation summaries from 3 law offices, which Lauren had kept in a folder in an apartment registered under a name I hadn't known until David's investigator confirmed it. Those became Exhibit G. The settlement we reached after 7 months of negotiation reflected what David called a clear and well-documented record of asset dissipation combined with significant earning disparity risk. Lauren's Meridian compensation, CEO salary, stock grants, deferred income, was factored in full. The house was mine at full value. A financial settlement was reached that David told me, without inflection, was among the more complete outcomes he had seen for a non-fault case in his career. You documented everything, he said, at our last meeting before finalization. I had time, I said. He looked at me over his glasses. You had more than that, he said. You had patience. And in my experience, patience is more valuable than evidence. Evidence wins cases. Patience wins outcomes. The Meridian board completed its review 9 months after I handed Richard Morrison the USB drive. The formal findings determined that Lauren Hartman had violated her fiduciary duty to the board through undisclosed conflicts of interest, improper resource allocation, and failure to disclose a personal relationship with a direct report. The review cited $2.3 million in improperly directed operational budget. Lauren resigned before the board could vote on removal. Her attorneys negotiated the terms of her departure over 3 weeks, and the language was carefully constructed to avoid the word terminated. She gave up stock vesting she would have received in 18 months. She signed a 2-year non-compete in the sector. She received a separation package that, by anyone's measure, was substantially less than what she would have received had she left on her own terms. Frank Sterling was terminated without severance. His departure was disclosed in a regulatory filing as related to the governance review. He did not receive a letter of recommendation from the company. He did not receive the COO role that had been quietly being built around him. He is currently, as of the last time I checked, consulting for a mid-market software firm in suburban Cincinnati. I know this the way you know things in the information age, passively, without looking very hard. Lauren is living in Evanston, not in one of the houses from the Harbor View folder. Those went to someone else, a smaller place. I don't know much beyond that, and I find that I don't need to. People ask me sometimes what the worst moment was. Not the guard, not the parking garage, not even standing in the Harbor View apartment holding that manila folder while Chanel hung in the air around me like a ghost. The worst moment was at 2:14 a.m. on a Wednesday 6 weeks after the board review concluded, when I was alone in the house for the first time in 28 years, and I sat in the kitchen and looked at the mug, the taxes, certain as death mug, and understood that it had been a gift from a person I never fully knew. Not that Lauren was evil. I've moved past that frame. People are not evil. They are afraid and ambitious, and sometimes those things combine in ways that require a victim, and the victim is whoever is closest and most trusted and therefore most easy to position in the narrative as a failure. I was the narrative failure, the man who wasn't enough, the accountant who stayed steady while she swung big, and who who never asked, apparently, for the credit of it. I was good at being steady. I didn't know that someone could spend 28 years measuring the distance between steady and spectacular and quietly decide that steady wasn't worth the space. I know it now. 14 months later, I still live in the house. I repainted the bedroom in October, which took 4 weekends and turned out a slightly different shade than I'd intended, and I have decided I like the shade I got better than the one I planned. I still do tax work, now independent consulting, my own practice, which is considerably less stable and considerably more mine. My first client was a woman starting a small design firm who reminded me, not unpleasantly, of Lauren at 30. Brilliant, restless, slightly terrifying. I hope she builds something extraordinary and never makes the choices Lauren made. I have had exactly one conversation with Lauren since the finalization. She called in March. I answered because I didn't recognize the number. She was calling from a number I didn't have. She said she wanted me to know she understood why I had done what I did. I said, I know you do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you were always the better one of us. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. I have turned it over and looked at it from several angles, and I have not yet decided if it is true or if it is the last form of management. The gesture designed to close a chapter cleanly on her terms. Maybe it doesn't matter which. Take care of yourself, Lauren, I said, and I hung up. Last month I went back to Osteria on Wabash, ordered the rigatoni with the short rib, ate it at a table by the window, and watched the foot traffic on Wabash, and thought about nothing in particular for the first time in a very long time. It tasted exactly the same as I remembered. That's the thing about good food. It doesn't revise its history. The same can't be said for everything.